If it's Wednesday, federal investigators are searching for what caused that cargo ship to slam into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, including looking into a report of contaminated fuel, as this tragic incident puts the spotlight back on the country's aging roads and bridges. Plus, new RNC co-chair Lara Trump meets the press, telling NBC News that the Republican Party and her father-in-law's presidential campaign is moving on from 2020 and focusing on beating President Biden, even as Mr. Trump faces 2 trials for his efforts to overturn the election. And Democrats win an Alabama special election, flipping a state house seat with a campaign focused on protecting abortion rights and access to IVF. And the latest sign that the abortion issue could be a serious problem for Republicans in November. Hi there, welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington. A recovery mission is underway right now at the scene of the wreckage of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, as investigators piece together what led to the accident and as authorities map out how to reopen one of the most vital ports in the country. Divers have not been able to enter the water today to search the Patapsco River for the 6 people believed to have died in the collapse. Remotely operated vehicles are doing an underwater survey now, but weather conditions are making the search difficult. My colleague Tom Yamas spoke to one of the leaders of the FBI's dive team about the challenges his divers are facing.
How dark is it down there?
So for a human, like you're going to see, it's going to be stirred up bottom. It's pretty much going to be black water. So you're not going to see any light. Lights actually aren't going to help because of all the particulates in the water. You're going to be just kind of reflected back at you. Sonar is going to come up as a clear image, though. So you can
so the divers essentially can't see anything?
No, divers won't be able to see anything. They're going to work by feel with their hands once they get on a target.
A team of investigators boarded the cargo ship today to gather evidence about what caused the crash. We're told the crew remains on board and is cooperating. The NTSB is also looking into a report by the Wall Street Journal that suggested the contaminated fuel may have played a role in the tragedy. Investigators have also recovered the ship's data recorder, a device similar to the black box found on an airplane. The head of the NTSB spoke to my colleague Tom Costello.
Everything from, positioning of the ship, speed of the ship, what might have been occurring at the time with respect to power or operation. It's quite a bit of information, throttle position, you name it. And that will help us, enable us to begin to put together a timeline of events that occurred prior to the striking of the bridge. And that is what we're looking for right now.
As for the Port of Baltimore, one of the largest in the country, it remains closed indefinitely. At the White House today, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg told reporters that it is too soon to be certain how long it will take to rebuild the bridge and reopen the port.
In the case of the bridge is that the original bridge took 5 years to construct. That does not necessarily mean it will take 5 years to replace, but that tells you what went into that original structure going up. Again, we need to get a sense of the conditions of the parts that look okay to the naked eye, but we just don't know yet, especially in terms of their foundational infrastructure. As far as the port, again, too soon to venture an estimate. The vast majority of the port is inside of that bridge, which means most of it cannot operate.
Now, in addition to the video of the bridge collapse, we're also now hearing radio transmission from Maryland Transportation Authority police from the moments before the accident, as officials work to clear traffic from the bridge as the ship approached.
Hold on traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we got to stop all traffic.
I'm holding traffic now. I was dragging, but we stopped prior to the bridge, so I'll have all outer loop traffic stopped.
10-4, is there a crew working on the bridge right now? There's a crew up there. You might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily.
Once you get here, I'll go grab the workers on the Key Bridge and then stop the outer loop.
213 dispatch, the whole bridge just fell down. Start is whoever, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
That is chilling. NBC News correspondent George Solis is on the ground in Baltimore. He joins me now. George, what's the latest on the search for those 6 missing people?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ryan. It is still ongoing, as you heard from that interview with one of the FBI officials with Tom Yamas there. They can't go into the water right now. Fortunately, the rain has let up somewhat, but still, these conditions are just too dangerous for them to get in there and really start looking for those bodies. They have mentioned there are points of interest, but this is murky water. It is also very cold. It has been cold out here for these last 24 hours now. And so the hope is that they will be able to go down there very soon. But obviously for the families, the heartbreak is just waiting on any kind of closure on whether or not their loved ones are going to be found. Still, though, we have seen those boats in the water, not helicopters today, again, because of that rain. But that was the scene yesterday when we saw those helicopters doing that search, hoping, everyone was hoping, of course, that there would be some positive news in this. But as this mission is now turned to recovery, it is now just a waiting game to see how soon those divers can get into that water for any indication of where these bodies might be.
And George, you did speak with the family of one of those 6. What did the family tell you?
Yeah, so I just moments ago wrapped up an interview with the brother of Maynor Suazo, and I'll tell you, the interview was in Spanish, but in any language, you can understand the frustration and the heartbreak, the not knowing. I'm told that all of these family members are now reunited in a facility here in Baltimore, just awaiting word, awaiting any update on whether or not their loved one will be found. In Maynor's case, this family is hoping that they find the body so they can return him back to his native Honduras, where he will be buried. He leaves behind an 18-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. So for them, this is a very, very emotional moment. His brother, who you see there on camera, telling me his last moment with his brother was a hug before he went off to work, not knowing that that would be the last time that he would see him, that he would speak with him. They are definitely at a loss for words, Ryan.
George, I just got a text from the governor's office that he's going to hold another press briefing at 5:30 today. So we'll probably get an update as to exactly what's happening here. But in addition to the governor speaking later this evening, what's the status of the investigation into what caused the cargo ship to lose power?
Yeah, and we're also awaiting a later press conference today from the NTSB. As you had mentioned at the top of the show, that one of the most key components of this investigation is that so-called black box. They have downloaded information from it on the vessel. So obviously that play-by-play, really getting that timeline to know what may have gone wrong and at what point it may have gone wrong to see if any of this could have been prevented. Of course, the NTSB does not speculate. So at this point, it really is just guessing on what may have happened. One of the theories, as you mentioned as well, the theory of that contaminated fuel. But right now, it is really just a matter of when or how soon we can get this port reopened, when traffic can start moving again. I've been using this example because everyone remembers that bridge collapse in Philadelphia, the 95 bridge collapse, where it happened in 12 days. Obviously, this is going to take some time, and all of the officials that we have seen and heard from saying, yeah, this is going to be a very costly endeavor, and it will take time to get all of this back up and running, Ryan.
Okay, George Solis, thank you for that. Let's turn now to Baltimore County Executive John Olszewski, who is going to give us more about the recovery and how his community is responding to all of this. Mr. County Executive, I know you've been through a lot. We appreciate you being here. Just talk to me about how the community is doing right now. I imagine it's still a sense of shock. I was there for the last 2 days, so I saw it firsthand. But from your perspective, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of your constituents. What are they dealing with right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I'd say a lot of shock and awe. People are still reeling from not only the impact of the actual incident, but also the unknowns of what comes next. And so we're doing our best to reassure them that at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, we're here. I had the opportunity to visit with members of impacted families, and they are heartbroken. And as you mentioned earlier, just looking for answers, just as members of our port community and surrounding neighborhoods are looking for answers about when we might get back to some sense of normalcy. And this is going to be a long road to recovery. People are hurting, so our hearts go out to those who've been impacted. We are so thankful for the incredible first responders we've seen, including those who took action to save untold number of lives by closing that bridge. This is a hard time, but we are resilient here in the Baltimore area, and really proud of the ways in which we're coming together in what is really unfortunate, terrible tragedy.
Yeah, Mr. County Executive, I've covered a lot of breaking news events, and having been there for 2 days, maybe having to go back to 9/11 or something along those lines, I can't think of another breaking news event where a community, almost everyone living in your community, is going to be impacted by this in some way, shape, or form. We obviously have the direct impact on those lives lost, but also the people whose jobs are going to be impacted by it. But then the commuters, our affiliate in Baltimore this morning warning people that normally had a 10-minute commute that it might be an hour. In your time as an elected leader, have you ever dealt with something that had such a widespread impact among the people you represent?
I mean, look, when I became county executive, I never expected we'd be dealing with a global pandemic that cost untold lives and disrupted our way of living. So, unfortunately, we've learned to expect the unexpected. And when you're a local leader, you feel the impact of these things in very profound and personal ways. This is a bridge, and it's still hard to even watch the video as we're watching it now. This is a bridge that I've crossed and others have crossed untold numbers of times. We've taken for granted that it would be a part of our skyline. We've taken for granted that it would be a shipping channel for commerce. So it really, as you said, it's one of those disruptive moments that really takes us completely by surprise, takes the wind out of our sails. But as we've done, both locally here in Greater Baltimore, as well as across the country, I mean, we have to rally behind each other in these moments. And that's why we're providing the resources. I want to thank the president for reaching out to me personally, Transportation Secretary, Admiral of the Coast Guard. There's so many individuals who've been part of the conversations. But to have a president, for example, who's out there saying, we're going to provide the resources, we're going to be there. He, along with our federal delegation, is going to be huge as we think about all of the needs coming ahead, whether it's clearing the shipping channels and rebuilding our beloved Key Bridge.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because this is obviously a Washington, D.C. based show, which a lot of elected leaders, particularly members of Congress, watch. What is your plea to members of Congress that maybe think that they live in a far-off state or a district that isn't directly impacted by this, and now you're going to come asking for the funding, the complete funding, as President Biden has pledged to rebuild your bridge? What's your pitch to those lawmakers?
I mean, unfortunately, this can happen to any community. Pick a city or a small town across the country. And so it isn't or shouldn't be a partisan issue. I just want to, again, thank the president for his call and commitment to find the funding that's necessary to restore Baltimore and the Baltimore region. I just would ask that all members of Congress, of people of goodwill and good conscience, to support the president in his effort to provide the resources that we know that we will need. This is going to be a very expensive proposition. It's going to be a very long road. But we're talking about 15,000 jobs directly at the port. We're talking about billions of dollars of commerce for our country. So we need members of Congress to step forward, do the right thing for not just Baltimore, but for our country. And, I'll be there doing whatever I can to support those efforts in the days, weeks, and months ahead.
Okay. County Executive John Olszewski, thank you so much. You and your community have a long road ahead. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with you and the people that you represent. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate it.
And experts say the structure of the Francis Scott Key Bridge was sound, but the collapse is putting the state of the country's aging roads and bridges in the spotlight. It happened in an instant. A massive bridge built nearly 50 years ago, gone in seconds. What happened in Baltimore was shocking, but it was a freak accident. And according to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, not a sign of a bigger problem. How concerned should Americans be about the bridges that they're traversing every single day in this country?
Well, this is a unique circumstance. I do not know of a bridge that has been constructed to withstand a direct impact from a vessel of this size.
The bridge really did not stand a chance because of the size of the load that it felt.
Maryland's governor says the bridge was fully up to code. In 2021, a Federal Highway Administration inspection found the bridge was in fair condition. Still, experts say it was built at a time when shipping vessels were much smaller, and engineers could not imagine an accident like the one that happened this week. In 2021, the CEO of Synergy Marine Group, the company that manages the ship that caused the Baltimore collapse, told Bloomberg, quote, "Traffic on the seas is different from what it was 10 years ago. We need to look at how the port infrastructure needs to change, how ships transit." Some bridges already have barriers to protect their support structures. Experts telling NBC News these protection systems should be installed at every bridge. But America's infrastructure is getting more and more attention. In 2007, the collapse of the I-35 bridge in Minnesota killed 13 people. Unlike Baltimore, federal investigators said a design error led to its collapse. And just last year, major fires caused the partial collapse of Interstate 95 in Philadelphia. In 2023, the Federal Highway Administration found 42,000 bridges were in poor condition. And experts believe the tragedy, while incredibly unique, offers an opportunity.
I think that this is a call to action.
And joining me now is Kent Harries. He's a civil engineer and professor at the University of Pittsburgh's Swanson School of Engineering. Kent, thank you so much for being here. This may seem like an obvious question, but I think it is one that needs an explanation. Would any bridge have collapsed if it had been struck by a cargo ship this size? And if so, how do we avoid something like this from happening again?
Yeah, I think rationally, most bridges on the face of the planet would have certainly been severely damaged or collapsed, taking a direct hit from, what is it, a 95,000 gross ton vessel or something like that. Obviously, the islands, the protection is really the only way you can deal with the physical protection, having the piers in shallows and things like that, so a ship this size would ground long before it hits it. Those are rational means of protection.
So is that something that engineers should consider when they rebuild this bridge, to have those type of barriers in the way to prevent a ship from getting to the point where it would ram into the base of a bridge?
Absolutely, but they've also got to look at the geometry and whether they have the room for that. You need certain channel widths. I don't know the depths of the river and whatnot at that location. That will mean a longer bridge, a longer span bridge, which will drive the cost, possibly drive the construction time, the design and the construction time as well. And so there's a lot of things to consider, and every river crossing, especially a port crossing like this, would be relatively unique. And so it's not easy to come up with one size fits all.
Yeah. I mean, is this something we should be worried about happening a lot in the future? Maybe not even a lot, but even happening again. I mean, when this bridge was built 50 years ago, there weren't 1,000-foot ships with that level of cargo coming in and out of the Baltimore harbor. Do these ships, or these bridges, need to be adjusted for the way we move cargo around the world now?
I mean, that's an interesting question. We have adjusted some bridges. The Bayonne Bridge comes to mind, where it was lifted. I don't remember how much it was lifted, but in order to accommodate taller structures. That's certainly possible. It's an expensive prospect. It is probably less resource intensive than replacing bridges. But you've got such a massive infrastructure, you don't have the option to go around to every bridge that might be restricting a port a little bit and changing things. Both sides have to give a little bit. In the same way, ships are very much limited by what can go through the Panama Canal. Ports are limited by what they can rationally handle. And so another potential response to this is also limiting the size of vessels that can enter certain ports.
Mm-hmm. And do cargo ships like this, I assume, have large anchors that can be dropped on command? Is it possible the ship was unable to drop its anchor because it lost power?
I don't know how ships operate. I would assume dropping an anchor is a dead man, which is a pretty easy thing to do. Basically, if you have no power, you can. But there's the proverbially, you can't stop a battleship quickly. You can't turn it quickly. Even if you can drop the anchor, it's going to drag. It's going to take time. It's going to take some of the inertia away. I had read that they had attempted to drop the anchor, in fact, but I don't know if that's true.
Okay, Professor Kent Harries, we appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much for being here. Coming up, Lara Trump speaks out on whether the RNC will foot the bill for her father-in-law's mounting legal woes and more. We'll have the new RNC co-chair's wide-ranging interview with our own Garrett Haake after the break. Plus, inside President Biden's battle to win back North Carolina in November after losing the swing state to former President Trump by just 1 point in 2020. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The RNC is ready to turn the page on the 2020 election, at least according to the group's newly minted co-chair and Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. Despite Donald Trump's frequent mentions of a rigged 2020 election, and despite Lara Trump previously publicly backing those baseless claims, casting doubt on the 2020 election, Lara Trump told my colleague Garrett Haake that 2020 was in the past.
Is it going to be the position of the RNC in 2024 that the 2020 election was not fairly decided or that it was stolen somehow?
Well, I think we're past that. I think that's in the past. We learned a lot. Certainly, we took a lot of notes. Right now, we have 23 states that have 78 lawsuits in these states to ensure that it is harder to cheat and easier to vote. And every single person, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, should want that. We want fairness and transparency in our elections. The past is the past, and unfortunately, we had to learn a couple of hard lessons in 2020.
But it comes as NBC confirmed reporting by the Washington Post that the RNC asked prospective employees if they believe the 2020 election was stolen. A source familiar with the conversations told NBC that interviewers were asked about it to, quote, gauge their knowledge of current voting laws and procedures. Now, Garrett also spoke to Lara Trump about how the RNC plans to handle the issue of abortion, an issue where the Republican Party and the Republican nominee have struggled to find a consensus, as Democrats see an opportunity to motivate voters ahead of November. Take a listen.
Should we expect the RNC, the Republican Party, to take a position on a federal abortion ban before November?
I do not believe that that is our responsibility. I think actually the most democratic thing has happened, which it's gone back to the states, and every state can decide for themselves what their position is on abortion. So no, I would not expect anything from the RNC.
And joining me now on set for more of his interview is NBC's Garrett Haake. That is a fascinating answer by Lara Trump, because we've seen national Republicans be all over the map when it comes to a national abortion ban, including her father-in-law, the candidate. What should we take? Because she was pretty emphatic with you about this. She didn't mince words at all.
No, she was very clear on this point, and I think the open question is to what degree does she really speak for the party or for her father-in-law, because she went on to say that she doesn't think, of all the positions that Donald Trump has taken on this issue, he's basically going to end up in the same place she is. I want to play what she's had to say when I asked about where he would land on this. Donald Trump has talked about the idea of maybe a 15 or a 16-week ban recently. He seems to be kind of kicking around that idea. Would you advise him to stay out of this issue from a federal perspective?
I think if you asked him now, I think he would say he agrees with allowing the states to decide.
Now, look, I'd love to ask him now about that, because as recently as a week and a half ago, he was saying on a radio interview that he thought 15 or 16 weeks was pretty reasonable, and it seemed that that was where he was going to land on this. And so, this has been a very active conversation in Trump world about how they handle this issue. It's probably the issue on which Joe Biden polls the best when you look at kind of the national spectrum of things that this election will be decided on. And I think it's very fraught. But here you have one voice in that conversation, perhaps one person pulling Trump one direction, saying this is the way we ought to go.
Yeah, and interestingly, a prominent woman.
That's right.
In that conversation. So what were some of your other big takeaways from the interview? Did anything else surprise you?
One thing that I found interesting was the messaging around how they're going to target different groups of individuals. We talked a little bit about black voters, for example, which is an area of focus for the Trump campaign. We also talked about Nikki Haley voters and how they will go after them and whether she thinks the campaign or the RNC needs to do that in some focused way. And the answer to both of those was the same, that basically Joe Biden is going to push those people back into our camp rather than us going out and finding them. Her answers essentially suggested that they think the Biden policies will be enough, that those folks will be forced back into the MAGA fold here. She said it's a binary choice, sort of who do you want to be with and who do you want to be against. They are not going to go chase down wayward Republicans here. I mean, you could essentially end up in a situation where we're really just seeing these two candidates laying waste to each other without affirmatively going to try to sort of solve these problems that they have within their own bases.
Well, and you say laying waste to these Republicans. Many of those type of Republicans are elected members of Congress.
Yep.
The reason that Republicans have a slim majority in the House. This is now an RNC that is built by Trump. It is basically the MAGA RNC right now. What does that say to these moderate Republicans? I think of Don Bacon in Nebraska, Mike Lawler in New York. Do they still fit in? Will they still get the support of the RNC?
Well, look, Lara Trump says they're going to. She says that she understands the reality of governing here, that you're not going to do anything. You're not going to get anything done if you lose the House, if you don't take the Senate. Having Donald Trump as president is nice, but it makes you for a pretty ineffective, control of Washington to just control the White House. But the way that the RNC is set up, the way that they have structured the, big dollar donations they're going to get does not bode well for a lot of those down ballot candidates. I also think, I know based on the contents of this interview, that Donald Trump's going to drive the bus on what their priorities are on an issue basis. We talked about this as relates to Ukraine and Russia. She basically said, we're going to follow Donald Trump's lead on that. So if you're one of those Republican candidates who is not in lockstep with the former president, I would expect not a ton of help or attention is going to come your way from the National Party.
Fascinating interview. Great job, Garrett. We appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for being here. here. Turning now to the Democratic side of the race, where, as we noted yesterday on this show, President Biden is eyeing North Carolina as his campaign's next battleground. Biden narrowly lost the Tar Heel state to Donald Trump in 2020, but this year Democrats are optimistic the president could flip it blue. NBC's Shaq Brewster has more.
Hello, Raleigh. A Biden campaign show of force in North Carolina.
It is good to be back in this beautiful state.
The president and vice president on the trail together, working to buck a losing streak for Democratic presidential candidates here. While Democrats haven't won a presidential race here in North Carolina since 2008, in 2020, President Biden came within striking distance, losing by just 1.3%. But this year, with state polls showing a tight battle, North Carolina's Democrats hope down-ballot races will drive energy up the party ticket.
Good. Josh Stein.
Nice to meet you.
Starting with the race for governor, where Democratic Attorney General Josh Stein is facing the outspoken Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who's earned headlines for making controversial and incendiary comments.
Now is not the time for this party to have weaklings who are unwilling to stand up and face the horde.
Stein campaigning with Biden, but keeping the focus on state issues like Medicaid expansion and public education at his individual stops, in a state where voters have elected a Democrat for governor in 7 of the last 8 cycles.
The thing about North Carolina is voters will go one way in federal races and another way in state races. It's just a dynamic. There's a sort of an inherent sense of balance.
A balance the Biden campaign is vowing to tilt in 2024, this week unveiling their strategy in the South. Policy-focused visits to North Carolina and Georgia, tens of millions spent on early television ads.
And Joe Biden gets that.
And a focus on key suburban areas where Nikki Haley showed strength in the Republican primary.
Yeah, and I'm saying why not? Like, why not North Carolina? Why not every state in the South right now? Do we not see that type of investment?
The 26-year-old chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, Anderson Clayton, says the efforts will need to continue for Biden to overcome the political headwinds, from courting rural voters to breaking voter apathy.
Yes, he can win this state. Is that going to be an easy thing to do? No, because it's going to be a fight, and it takes early investment. It takes boots on the ground everywhere. It takes people getting out into these communities and building the coalitions that he needs to say, this is how they fought for us.
NBC's Shaq Brewster joins us now from Raleigh. So, Shaq, President Biden lost North Carolina by a narrow margin in 2020. Are voters in the state responding to his message this time around?
Hi there, Ryan. Well, it seems as if they still have some work to do. When you look at the head-to-head matchup, yes, it's still within the margin of error, but you're seeing former President Trump consistently with a slight lead in some of those polls. And when you talk to Republicans, they're frankly saying they're not too concerned about Democrats right now, or at least that's what they're signaling. They say beyond the head-to-head matchups, when you look down to the issues, you see Donald Trump leading on issues that voters here in this state say they care more about, talking immigration, talking about the economy. So it's going to take a lot of work, and that's what Democrats admit. That's going to take more events like the ones we saw yesterday for Biden to really have a chance at flipping the state that Donald Trump won twice.
Well, and is the campaign planning something similar across other southern swing states? I think of one just 2 states south of where you are in Georgia. Are we going to see this all over the South?
Yeah, I mean, in that campaign memo that came out earlier this week, they called these 2 states, North Carolina and Georgia, they called them Southern battleground. So one of the first states, I should say, that we saw President Biden visit after his State of the Union address was Georgia. He visited it on a Saturday. You saw Vice President Harris also in Georgia just earlier this month. So these are 2 states that they know and expect will be close come November, and they believe, when you talk to Democrats here at a local level, when you listen to what the Biden campaign is saying and also signaling, they believe that it will take a lot of investment, a lot of early investment, and that's a sign of what we saw, again, not just yesterday, but really over the past month or so in the weeks after the State of the Union, Ryan.
All right, Shaq Brewster, great reporting. We appreciate it. Up next, a possible warning sign for Republicans after a loss in a special election in Alabama where IVF access and abortion rights were at the center of the Democratic win. The panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Democrats notched a special election victory last night in a race where reproductive rights were front and center and they're hoping the trend continues in November. Democratic candidate Marilyn Lands won a state house seat in Alabama after making abortion rights and IVF access central to her campaign. Lands defeated her Republican opponent, Teddy Powell, by 26 points in a district that Donald Trump narrowly carried in 2020. Reminder, this is in Alabama. This victory comes after Republican Governor Kay Ivey signed a bill giving some legal protections to IVF following immense backlash to a state Supreme Court ruling earlier this year that threatened the procedure. It also comes as abortion may be explicitly on the ballot in several states this November, including battlegrounds like Arizona, Florida, and Nevada. Joining me now to talk about all of this on set is Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief for USA Today, Democratic strategist Amisha Cross, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman, who, of course, just recently worked on Tim Scott's presidential campaign. And so, Susan, this is just one special election in Alabama, but I do feel it's starting to become a trend where we say this is just one election where abortion was on the ballot, but Democrats tend to do very well. In fact, I believe they've almost swept most of these contests where abortion is central to all of this. What does this tell us about what could happen in November?
Well, it probably doesn't tell us that Alabama's in play.
Right.
But the fact that this district swung in Alabama says that maybe Georgia is in play. Maybe North Carolina is more in play because you can have these suburban voters with whom this issue really resonates. And what the Republican candidate tried to do, which was to talk about other things, to talk about education and talk about crime, didn't work. Clearly, Republicans need to find some better way to address the issue of abortion than they have so far.
Susan brings up a good point, Matt, and it's what Garrett Haake tried to press Lara Trump on. You may care about all these other issues and be in common with Republicans on it, but if you don't have a clear answer on abortion, it seems as though voters are penalizing you. What do Republicans need to do in this post-Roe world to define where they stand on the issue?
I think they've been trying to figure that out since Roe fell. I mean, look, I think you saw a lot of the head-to-head polling recently. Trump winning by 2 to 4 points, and an educated kind of guess would be okay if the election were held today, he would win. However, I have shades of 2022 where Republicans were doing very well in the polls, yet Democratic voters, specifically suburban Democrats, suburban women, younger women, came out, even though abortion was maybe not the number one issue, maybe it would have been like the third or fourth in terms of most popular people that was driving people. The people that were voting for it were crawling over broken glass to vote, essentially, and that's what we saw here. So this is what worries me. It worried me before this. It's going to worry me after, let alone these Alabama results.
Well, and what Lara Trump told Garrett is that this is an issue the states are going to take care of now. Is that enough? Do you have to do more than that?
I think that, but then all you're doing is putting the burden on these House candidates. Somebody's going to answer this, right? So you're right. You're taking the pressure off Trump, but you're going to have to put pressure on the folks running for House and Senate and even these House candidates.
Yeah, all right. Amisha, earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal got their hands on an NRCC campaign memo. That's the group that runs the congressional candidates. I think Matt
I used to run comms for it,
at one point. Matt did not write this. I want to be clear. Here's what they wrote. The guidance tells candidates that they must confidently articulate their stance and that being unwilling to stake out a clear position with voters is the worst possible solution. Maybe Matt did write it, given what he just told us. The guidance also recommended that members express empathy for women, discuss common sense solutions, and push back on what it calls Democrats' extremism on the issue. So you're the strategist on the other side. Is that an effective way to rebut the message that Democrats are going to put out there?
No, because the Republican messaging isn't unclear. It is very clear, and women are showing up at the polls to showcase that they understand the message they've been given. It is that women's reproductive rights don't matter, that we do not control our own bodies, that pregnancy is something that should be controlled by the state. And quite frankly, tossing it back to the states created an overwhelming patchwork of decisions that were made by people who are not healthcare providers, which often put women at great risk for health concerns up to and including death. Republicans have been very clear for quite some time of how they feel about women and how they feel that they should be able to control women's bodies. And I think that at this point, particularly as we see a nation that has more women voting than we've ever had historically, a lot of young women who are having their voices heard at the polls, and a strategic movement to suburban areas by people who used to live in a lot of liberal centers. And that's not only in northern cities, that's also in many southern cities and towns as well. We're seeing that reflected in what's happening at the polls.
Okay, so Susan, I want to play a little bit more of Garrett's interview with RNC co-chair Lara Trump. Garrett asked her about getting Haley voters back on board in November. This is what she had to say.
These people, I don't think, they don't want to vote for Joe Biden, that's for sure. The option is Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so whether you like his personality or not should not have any bearing on anything. They are welcome to come back. We are here to work as a party. And in order to elect Donald Trump and Republicans all the way down the ticket, we would love to have them come back.
I keep hearing this idea of a binary choice. I mean, Democrats make that argument a lot, too, with progressive voters that aren't enthused about Joe Biden. At some point, you've got to convince people to vote for you, don't you, Susan?
Or maybe just ask them.
Right.
Donald Trump has not yet asked Haley voters to vote. He hasn't done the traditional outreach to Nikki Haley herself to persuade her to support him. I mean, in the most traditional political world, Nikki Haley would be his running mate because she did well in the primaries. She represents another part of the party that would be unifying. There is, by the way, no chance that Donald Trump is going to go down that route. The fact is voters have other choices. They can vote for a third-party candidate. They can stay home. And that's something that you might see with some of these Nikki Haley voters.
So, Amisha, is this a product of the party becoming too much about Donald Trump's identity and not about a certain set of issues or trying to message this something to these voters?
Absolutely. I'd argue the party has absolutely lost its identity. Just a few years ago, the pre-Trump era, a candidate like Nikki Haley would have sailed through to a nomination. Today's world, in one that the party is more of a reflection of Trump than it is of Republican ideology, and I would argue Republican values, it has really turned off a lot more of those traditional Republican voters. And to the point we just heard, I do think several of them will probably stay at home. Others will decide on whatever third-party candidate emerges. But Donald Trump isn't even trying to reach out to those candidates, which is something we have never really seen before. He has abjectly said he does not want Nikki Haley voters. And to see that there are so many of them in various parts of the country where the MAGA sycophants aren't the only people who are going to be in a general election, he has to try to reach more if he wants to actually be really competitive come November. And I don't think that he really cares.
So, but is there a Democrat problem here, too, in terms of the binary choice argument, Matt? I mean, there's a lot of Democrats.
A lot of this conversation, I'm having deja vu for, early 2016, April 2016, where, look, Republicans, a couple things. Some of the Haley voters, you were never going to touch them. They were either Democrats who didn't vote for Trump last time, and you were never going to get them again. They wanted to make their voice known in a Republican primary. I think the other way is a lot of these folks, whether it's the Democrats who are in Michigan, per se, or Republicans, it's easy to make these sorts of calls and votes in March and in April. Look me in the eye in October and early November and tell me when there is, I do believe, a binary choice. People put their jerseys on that you're not going to do it. I think it's a lot easier to make a claim now, no matter what side we're talking about, than it is later in the fall.
All right, so Matt, you're somebody that has been responsible for organizing campaigns, getting people to the polls, staffing people. And I'm interested in your take about what's happening now that Trump has officially taken over the RNC. More layoffs, right? This is at a time where the DNC and the Biden campaign are staffing up. They're opening battleground offices all over the place. Is there a problem with the Republican Party right now in terms of their organization because the RNC isn't as well funded right now and hasn't begun that organizing and outreach?
Separating it a little bit. I'm not surprised kind of Trump has put his imprint on the RNC. That's been done that way since Maureen Reagan helped run it back in the mid-'80s. So not surprised in the quote-unquote takeover. I am concerned, though. The lack of funds is something that is going to have ramifications down the road, right? You always expect the president and the DNC, whoever controls that, to have a lot of money. But you need a robust RNC, you need a robust infrastructure. He needs to be able to raise the money because that'll have effect down ballot, not just on his opportunity, but on the House and Senate candidates, too.
And Amisha, quickly, the RNC is shutting down their minority outreach centers as part of their cost-cutting measures here. Lara Trump suggested to Garrett the solution is going to be just big rallies. Is that enough to reach out to black voters?
Absolutely not. And I would argue their minority outreach centers weren't successful in reaching out to black voters when they were staffed. Their goal was largely to expand to Latino voters more than anything else, and we did see some gains there. Black voters were never really in the pocket for Republicans, and even when that strategy was put out, it was put out more as a social media and press hit than it was actionable in black communities.
And then finally, Susan, obviously Biden has the money advantage right now. What does he have to do to take advantage of that? It's not just enough to have the dollars. You got to use them the right way.
He has twice as much money raised in cash on hand than Donald Trump. That's a big advantage. And he's campaigning in a much more robust way. Since Super Tuesday, President Biden has campaigned in 8 battleground states. And Donald Trump, has he gone to one?
I don't think so.
I think he went to Ohio.
Yeah.
But that is a big difference that in the end could really count. You see the president out there in a bigger way than he was before.
Okay. Great conversation, guys. I appreciate you being here. Susan Page, Amisha Cross, and Matt Gorman. Thank you all for being here. But up next, Capitol Hill's next challenge. I'll talk to a Democratic lawmaker leading the effort to force a vote on Ukraine aid. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Congress is on recess after their 11th hour passage of key government funding bills last week. But when lawmakers return, a different funding fight still awaits them. The Senate passed foreign aid bill, which contains funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, remains stuck before the House of Representatives after Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said that he wouldn't bring it to the floor. Now, House Democrats are eyeing a rare procedural tool that could force Johnson to bring it to a vote if they can get the signatures needed to make it happen. And joining me now is a lawmaker driving that effort, Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern. Congressman, thank you for being here. We're obviously talking about a discharge petition, which probably makes a lot of people's eyes water when we talk about congressional procedures. But just a simple explanation of it, if you get enough signatures to the floor, you can force any bill to get voted on. At this point, you have 191 signatures, but you need to get to 218. What's the prospect of that happening when you return from recess?
Well, I think it all depends on whether Speaker Johnson announces that he will schedule a vote on Ukraine. I mean, that is the issue. It is Ukraine. We know that Ukraine will be out of ammunition, out of military equipment at the end of April. We've been trying to get the Speaker to commit to scheduling a vote so we can help aid Ukraine in its fight against Vladimir Putin. Up to this point, we've gotten maybe some signals that he might, but then it appears he's not. So we don't know what's happening. But this is about putting pressure on the Speaker to do what he should do. He ought to schedule a vote up or down on Ukraine. Let us have that debate. Let everybody be able to cast a vote. If you're for helping Ukraine against Putin, then you can vote yes. If you're not, you can. If you're on the side of Putin, you can vote no. But it is important that we have this vote.
Well, based on my reporting, it seems pretty unlikely that he just puts that bill on the floor without any changes to it. So that means your discharge petition, if you want that piece of legislation to pass, is perhaps the best way to get it there. But at this point of your 191, you only have one Republican signature, and that's outgoing Congressman Ken Buck. So that gets you back down to 190. Talk to me a little bit about the outreach that you've made to your colleagues across the aisle. Who are you talking to? Are you getting any kind of sense that there may be Republicans that are willing to join you in this effort?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Republicans I've talked to that believe we should help Ukraine out. And the question is whether or not they have the courage to be able to sign a discharge petition to basically force the Speaker's hand. And I think the pressure on them will be increased when we come back. We don't come back until April 9th. Again, we're told that, that Ukraine is out of equipment by the end of April. So, I mean, there's not a lot of time here. So I think the pressure on those Republicans who say they want to stand up to Putin will be even greater. And maybe the Speaker will do the right thing. Maybe he will schedule a vote. But if he doesn't, this is kind of the only option we have available to us. And even this option, there are ways the Speaker could try to derail it. Mm-hmm. So, again, I don't know what's so controversial about scheduling the vote. You let people vote up or down, and I believe the House would overwhelmingly pass a package to aid Ukraine.
So I'll tell you what's so controversial about it, Congressman, which is kind of the big elephant in the room, and that is that there's a group of conservative House Republicans who never want to see this measure voted on, probably because you're right that it'll pass, and that could lead to a motion to vacate for the Speaker of the House. That's probably the biggest reason that he's not moving ahead with it. So to that end, if he's willing to put that Senate bill on the floor with no changes, would you be willing to protect him in the event that a motion to vacate were brought up and you were forced to vote on it?
Well, that's something we ought to talk about. The Speaker ought to talk to Hakeem Jeffries and have that conversation. And again, I think it's clear that he's not going to bring the Senate bill up. He's already said that he wants to make some changes. So let's see what the changes he wants to make are, and if it's something the administration can live with, then if that's the case, we ought to bring that up. And if he doesn't want to bring it up, we can bring it up under a discharge petition. So there ought to be a vote. This issue is important enough where the entire House ought to be able to have a chance to say yes or no. And they need to, and basically they need to break with the MAGA wing of their party. I mean, this is ridiculous. It is a minority of the Republican conference that is causing all this trouble. The Speaker of the House has to have the spine to stand up to the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world and do what's right for the country and for the world. This is embarrassing, quite frankly.
So tell me what you'd be open to when it comes to changes to this bill. He's floated the idea of potentially loaning the money to Ukraine in a very kind of soft way, even perhaps giving them the opportunity to default on it. Would that be enough if it was separated from Israel funding? Or what if it was tied to some sort of border security measure? What if any of those things are you open to?
Well, first of all, we're going to have to see what it is that he's proposing. We have to look at and actually read the bill. But look, I'm going to rely on the administration to tell me whether or not whatever they're proposing on Ukraine means that Ukraine will get the money, whether this is workable. If it is, then I think they would be open to it. But either way, he has to schedule something. We have to put something on the floor. We're running out of time. And the longer he waits, quite frankly, the harder it is going to be for him. Look, I understand the speaker's anxiety. I mean, he comes to work every day wondering whether it's going to be his last day as speaker. But Democrats, we've bailed him out on appropriation bills. We're happy to work with him if he's going to do the right thing. And the right thing here is to bring a bill on Ukraine. We need to help Ukraine stand up against Vladimir Putin.
All right, finally, let's talk about the 2024 election. There's a new CNBC poll that shows President Biden's job approval is on the rise compared to late last year, but he's still trailing former President Trump. How can he close that gap? What kind of case should he be making for a second term?
Look, I think he made an incredible case in the State of the Union address. I thought it was a terrific speech, and I think it laid out what's at stake, not just on the issues like the economy and on foreign policy and on the environment, but also about protecting our democracy. I personally believe, when I look at these polls, that the Trump numbers, the Trump voters are being overcounted and the Biden voters are being undercounted. I think at the end of the day, people love this country. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see us lose our democracy. They're frightened to death of Donald Trump. I mean, he's a bigot. He praises dictators. I mean, this is a president who even said nice things about Adolf Hitler. I mean, he does not belong anywhere near the White House. And I think they're not only amongst Democrats and independents, but even amongst some Republicans that they've had enough of this. So I think Biden's going to win. I think he's going to win comfortably.
All right, Congressman Jim McGovern, we appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your recess. We'll see you when you get back here to Washington.
All the best. Thank you.
Still to come, lawyers for the president's son are in court right now looking to get 9 tax charges, 3 of them felonies, dismissed. We'll have the latest next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Attorneys for President Biden's son, Hunter, are asking a federal judge in Los Angeles today to toss out tax-related charges filed against him. Hunter Biden's lawyers argue the charges are politically motivated, an argument that prosecutors have vehemently denied. If the case goes forward, the trial is set to take place in June, just months before the presidential election. Joining me now is NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. So talk to us about what this hearing was all about. What is Hunter Biden's team asking the judge to do?
Essentially, they want the case dismissed, and they're arguing that this case would never have been brought against a similarly situated other figure, that this is only really because he's the president's son, because the special counsel was appointed, and ultimately because they're caving to pressure from House Republicans. This has been a major issue going on when you have House Republicans repeatedly pointing to Hunter Biden. That's obviously been a major topic on Capitol Hill in recent months and even in years. So they basically are saying that this case would have never been brought up against somebody else. It's only because he's the president's son that this case is really being brought forward. And essentially, it's one of those things where when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Mm-hmm. And like in a special counsel situation, it's very rare for them not to indict someone, mm-hmm. and that's what happened here. They went after someone. That's usually the outcome when you appoint one of these special counsels, except, of course, in the case of the president of the United States.
And I would imagine, though, a judge leans on precedent in a situation like this, and this is a pretty unprecedented situation, right? So is the judge going to have to rule based on just his view of the law and not based on prior case law?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an uphill battle for them to get these cases tossed, because you have to have perfectly comparable situations, and that's unlikely. On the gun charge, the separate case out of Delaware, that is a little bit different because, I mean, I've covered a lot of those cases, and those cases really are really rare, those gun charges, because typically when you see those, it's like because someone was a white supremacist and had a gun, and that's the way they went after them because they were also a user of an illegal drug. So that actually is a very rare charge, but the tax charges, it's a little bit more in the weeds and really complicated, but it is not extremely common for those charges to be brought, especially if someone had already paid back the debt that they owed.
And we did hear from Judge Scarsi earlier. What sense did you get from his line of questioning?
Well, we don't expect an answer necessarily today, but, he's definitely hearing the arguments from everyone here, and we'll ultimately hear probably pretty soon down the line.
Okay, Ryan Riley, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And we're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, but the news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.